With optimism in the air in Ukraine and the rest of Europe, naturally people will start to wonder just how optimistic they should be. Sure, the latest territorial exchange figures look good, but how good could they become over the next few months? Well, no need to delay the question for today's edition of the Geopolitics HelpLINE. Is there a real possibility for a Ukrainian summer offensive to gain some ground, given the current financial and personnel crunch that Russia faces? My blunt answer is that an offensive, to the extent that the viewer likely had in mind, is unlikely. Possible? Maybe. And if we are willing to go a step down, certainly some type of attempt at forward movement is likely. But before we move forward, let's all get on the same page regarding what I have in mind here. I would not describe the numbers that we have seen over the last few months as constituting a counteroffensive. Rather, they stem from counterattacks in areas of active operation, where local commanders see an opportunity and take it. By contrast, Ukraine retook 6,000 square kilometers in September 2022 alone. That stemmed from a centrally planned, theater-wide counteroffensive. I know that those words should be synonymous, at least on the surface, but they are not. Counterattacks are small-scale operations. Counteroffensives are large-scale operations. Clearly, Ukraine has found a template that works at the counterattack level. Ukraine is going to exploit that template for as long as it can, which includes the summer months that the question referenced. However, I think some caution is in order. The current stage of the war feels closer to a random walk than anything else. Russia may very well formulate a counter-counter strategy, and then we could end up back even or headed in the opposite direction. That said, for exercises like this one, I think the best way to frame it is in the following manner. Suppose that I went to sleep tonight and woke up in October. You tell me that Ukraine captured 3,000 square kilometers while I was gone. It is up to me to deduce why. Well, the cheap answer is that, in fact, Putin was done. There is a civil war ongoing in Russia, and the Russian army is too distracted to offer any resistance inside of Ukraine. Actually, if that were the case, I would be surprised if it were only 3,000 square kilometers. If there is going to be a crisis in Moscow, then it is going to be a crisis in Moscow, and we are looking at a complete break in frontline discipline. However, I have said many times before that such a challenge to the Kremlin's authority is unlikely at the moment, so my best guess would go in one of two other, non-mutually exclusive directions, which I will intersperse with some other important comments. Direction 1 is winning the logistics game, something that Ukraine has been improving upon recently. Indeed, you might recall that part of the change in pace was the result of Ukraine having dominated the medium-range drone space. These are between the quadcopters designed to hunt down enemy infantry, and Shahed-style, long-range, one-way attack drones designed to hit infrastructure. Well, logistics hubs have to be somewhat close to the front lines, otherwise they cease to be useful. But you cannot put them on top of the front line, lest you make them easy targets for artillery. Hence, you need to find a happy medium. And that is why medium-range drones are the appropriate counter. Drone operators at the edge of the gray zones need a constant supply of new drones to fly and food to eat. Cut off the logistics operations, and they get neither. From there, your own short-range drones can go to work, because conveniently the enemy's intercepting and jamming systems have also been cut off from resupply. After that, you can hop aboard your mechanized units, which will be freer to operate without concern that a single quadcopter will destroy millions of dollars of equipment. That puts you on top of relatively unprotected Russian infantry, at which point you can do your worst. At that point, there will be some tension and mystery there in how well Russia has pushed its defensive lines. Recall that Ukraine's previous attempt at an in-country offensive was in the spring of 2023. It failed to get off the ground because Russia spent the prior winter getting serious about constructing defensive barriers. The problem with being on an offensive is that the front line moves, and your defensive lines may be far back from where the battles are currently taking place. Ukraine has avoided this problem by investing in fortifications far back from the front, essentially trading a gamble on current security for the sure thing of a fallback position. In contrast, there is less known about the seriousness of Russia's investment. It is tempting to guess that it has not matched the effort that the Kremlin ordered into the offensive. After all, the problem back in the late summer of 2022 was that Russia was too focused on forward movement to prepare for a Ukrainian counteroffensive. At least the public information indicates that there has not been much in the way of new construction along recent Russian gains. Instead, more pressing needs force the Kremlin to invest in entrenchments inside of Russia, particularly near Kursk, as well as to reinforce air defenses around bases deeper inside of Russia. On the other hand, the Kremlin has more manpower to assign today than it did back then. That is the consequence first of the September 2022 mobilization, and then later an accumulation of contract soldiers exceeding losses for more than 2 years. The word of warning is that the recruitment-to-loss ratio recently flipped. So if Russia was not doing this yet, it will get harder as time progresses. Zooming out, I think there is extra intrigue here regarding the original logistics question. Let's live in a hypothetical world where Moscow did not have nuclear weapons. The United States could engage Russian forces without fear of atomic retaliation. And we flip the 2024 presidential election, so we have someone a bit more amenable to European security affairs in office. I have no doubt that an American-led air campaign, supplemented by European squadrons, would make short work of the Russian front line. The idea is straightforward. NATO doctrine has always been about disabling logistics networks, and Russian air defenses are poor enough that Western forces could quickly establish dominance. I suspect that casual war watchers will not realize this fact after having looked at the Iran war. But the big differences there are that the United States is the one trying to alter the status quo, and there are no boots on the ground that the air campaign is supporting. Both of these conditions would be flipped in Ukraine. Anyway, if drones can suppress logistics in a manner comparable to standard NATO operations, we are looking at an entirely different era of war. Many Western countries look at the battlefield dynamics in Ukraine with a degree of skepticism, that our brave new drone world is more of a function of Ukraine's conventional aerial shortcomings than a wake-up call for doctrinal change. Obviously, NATO allies are investing heavily in drones, but these are supplemental strategies rather than the main doctrine. Ukraine succeeding in the logistics game would force NATO to reconsider its future investments. It will also force NATO to think about how vulnerable its own logistics operations are. To completely shift gears, the other main pathway I would retrospectively use to try to explain a summer offensive is a Russian manpower crunch. We know that the Kremlin is now struggling to meet recruitment goals. The way that this could turn into something more is if the intelligence reports about this are off, and the Kremlin is actually facing a much larger deficit than is publicly understood. Alternatively, there is a second manpower pathway. It is a more subtle point because it involves second derivatives. We all know that raising salaries will attract more contract soldiers to enlist. What is incredibly opaque is what the shape of that supply function looks like. Indeed, there is a big difference if it looks like this and you are currently here and need to start recruiting more soldiers, versus if it looks like this and you need to do the same. In the first case, a slight increase in salaries will bring large numbers into the fold. In the second case, it does virtually nothing, and you will have to pay extraordinary amounts to make a difference on the battlefield. So if this second case is a better representation of where we currently are, then the Kremlin would soon run into some major manpower issues. Still, I need to add a couple of reminders here. 1. Russia has more active soldiers in Ukraine than Ukraine does. And 2, Ukraine's recent gains have taken advantage of Russia not switching to a defensive footing. A serious Ukrainian offensive would have to bridge this problem, which would no doubt involve the Kremlin completely misreading the situation. The final point that I want to make is a general one on the offensive's location. These territorial exchange numbers hide variance within the front lines. It is never a uniform push, and some fronts may move in the opposite direction as other fronts. In the current situation, Ukraine's progress is coming along the Zaporizhia axis. This is worth noting because deeper progress along that front follows the playbook developed for 2023. Drive to the Sea of Azov coastline, split the Russian forces in two, and lay siege southward. Again, I want to conclude by emphasizing that this is not the likely scenario for the summer. But if you told me that Ukraine indeed recaptured significant territory, these would be my best guesses as to how. Meanwhile, there is no guesswork for you going into the next video, not when you have a fantastic set of recommendations on your screen right now. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.